Welcome to the show, guys. Joseph Robert Camo, the fantasy football counselor. In this video, we're talking about five bounce back players for fantasy football 2022. 5 players that had a mediocre year or had a bad year based on their talent, because they're great talent. Just had a bad year. It happens. They're human. We're all allowed to have one bad year. We're going to dive into 5. I'm going to give you guys 5 right here, right now, that could bounce back in a significant manner that I think the sheep will sleep on. I think they're going to be better value than had they performed on their top level. They're going to be better value. So you might get them for a steal this year, potentially in drafts. We're going to have to see how the ADPs fall. Now, I want to tell you guys, you can pre-order the 16-round draft solution. Do not miss out. Get in right now. You will crush your leagues. I'm absolutely confident in this system with absolute certainty. This isn't like, hey, get a draft kit. It's going to be copy and paste rankings like everybody else does. This is almost a guarantee. Now, there's no guarantees in fantasy because injuries happen, but this is as close to a bulletproof system to help you guys crush your leagues. I'm absolutely confident in it. I breed champions. This actually works. Testimonials through the roof. This works. I'm telling you guys, get the 16-round draft solution linked it below, or head on over to thefantasyfootballcounselor.com. You can pre-order for the lowest price of the season. Go do that right now. Secondly, if you're new to the channel, if you're just watching, because I see a lot of people aren't subscribed and just tune in or see this video when they search fantasy football, make sure you guys click subscribe. This will help you guys win. You will dominate. You will crush and beat the sheep every single year. Your league mates won't know what hit them. Click subscribe and leave a thumbs up. And in the comments below, I want to make this super interactive, guys. It's about interactive. This isn't about you watching and absorbing content. It's about you interacting. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you guys interact below in the comments and mention who you think will be a bounce back player this year. So thumbs up, check. Bounce back player, leave below, check. And get 16 rounds pre-order for the lowest price, check. Let's get to the show. Let's do it. All right, first bounce back player. I know this one's a little more obvious, so I'm going to get it out of the way and we'll get to some juicy stuff here with the other 4. But the first bounce back player is Derrick Henry. Now, I understand he had a bad year, but listen, he played 8 games. He was absolutely crushing it, like 10 rushing touchdowns, 219 attempts. That is absolutely amazing. He was on pace for another 2,000 rushing yard season. This guy is here to break records. He is as robust as they come. He had a down year, and I hate to say it, but I kind of called it. I don't want to say I called the injury, but what I did call is I did call that there's a possible regression when people come off the pinnacle year. It's almost certain that this happens with people coming off pinnacle years. So when you look at a guy like Derrick Henry, consider this his down year. Consider this the year where, hey, you know what happened? He got hurt. We get that out of the way, but I still think he's still, relatively young. I mean, he's not a Najee Harris or anything like that, but I still think he's got at least 1 to 2 more seasons, maybe 1 season of full workhorse, truck run you over capability, right? Again, finishing 22nd amongst running backs, 219 attempts, guys. When you put that in perspective, when you look at attempts here, just to put it in perspective, that made him 10th in attempts. He's top 10 in attempts, and he played 8 games. 8 games, okay? Let's see who he beat here in attempts here when he's looking at 219. He beat Josh Jacobs in attempts, who had 217. Remember, Derrick Henry had 219. He beat Sony Michel with 208. He beat Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. Both of them had 203 attempts, respectively. And hopefully Melvin Gordon goes away because I really love Javonte Williams to take that role. He beat a lot of people. Aaron Jones had 171 attempts. He beat DeAndre Swift in attempts. Miles Sanders. He beat a lot of people in attempts, and he played 8 games. So I think it's going to be a huge bounce back season. And I know he's still going to be a top 3 pick coming off the board, but I just had to mention it. I had to mention that he is due for a bounce back. And I think just the fact that he was injured, maybe people will draft maybe someone else, maybe a Dalvin Cook ahead of him or something like that. And the only 2 people I see drafting ahead of him potentially are Jonathan Taylor and Najee Harris, but I think he potentially beats both those guys in rushing yards, maybe touchdowns again this upcoming season. So, again, Derrick Henry, absolutely love him for a bounce back. The second one, you're going to be like, oh, man, I don't even want to listen to this. But here's the deal. I'm not drafting. Oh, by the way, bounce back doesn't mean I'm drafting him. Now, Derrick Henry, I may draft, but next couple guys I want to mention, I'm just saying they could bounce back. So, again, don't get me wrong. Oh, you told me bounce back and they suck. I get it. Right? They had bad years, but don't always buy the recency bias. But this is a 1-2 punch. I'm going to put these guys together in one package as the second player that'll bounce back. But I'm talking CMC and Saquon. Coming off injuries, injury prone, they're modeling, they're doing their thing. Saquon, I don't know if I have hope for him. I know he had a bad O-line, bad situation. I mean, what's he bouncing back from? He sucked for the past couple years. He's basically bouncing back on his rookie season, but more CMC, if anything. who've been, these guys have been plagued with nagging injuries, just haven't reached their full potential. But I would assume one or both these guys are going to bounce back because they had such crap years based on injuries. So bounce back based off their pinnacle years, which hasn't been recent. And again, I'm not too excited about them. So CMC Saquon as a combo here, I'm probably not drafting either one of these guys, but you could probably get them both for great value and could bounce back, give you some sort of decent value at the running back position, high-end RB2 potential, okay? Bounce back number 3 is Russell Wilson. I mean, when I look at Russell Wilson's numbers here, let's break it down here. This is a guy that finished number 6 in 2020 amongst quarterbacks, okay? And he threw over 4,000 yards, over 4,200 yards. In 2019, finished 3rd amongst quarterbacks. This is a guy that always finishes near the top. He's an elite quarterback that you get for immense value in all your drafts. You get him like last year and the year before, get him in the 6th round, right? And then he has these bad years. Once in a while, he gets hurt, right? He only played, what did he play this game? He didn't play the full season. I'm going to pull up his numbers on what he played. But here's the deal. He's due for a bounce back. This is one of his worst seasons. He finished 15th. Let me get this straight. 15th. He played 14 games, 242 points. That's not typical Russell Wilson. Typical Russell Wilson throws for over 4,000 yards. You only, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Not typical Russell Wilson. I still think he's got a good couple years left in him where he could produce on a high level. And I don't know what's going on with that team or what they're going to do here. The Seahawks just had a bad year all around. But Russell Wilson's a guy is definitely due for a bounce back that could still give you the top 5 quarterback numbers that you could probably get for immense value in your drafts. A guy, again, who's been consistent. Finished number 6 in 2020. Finished number 3 in 2019. Always when healthy, finishing in the top 5. Super consistent. 4,000 yards, passing seasons, right? And again, great years in 2020, 2019. Had a bit of a down year. Possibly going to bounce back. And that's what we're looking for. Russell Wilson. Probably going to be immense value in your drafts. I'm going to be keeping him on my radar as my QB1 and getting a good backup behind him, potentially, okay? Let's move on to number 4 here. Not a big fan of him because he was really drafted high in drafts. I told you to avoid him. Always stay away from wide receivers coming off pinnacle years, due for a decline and a huge target share. But I was talking about Deandre Hopkins. Now, honestly, here's the deal. He finished about, 46th amongst wide receivers or 40th among, what did he pull up here? Exactly where he finished in PPR. I always talk about PPR and I talk about ADPs, right? Based on their category. So amongst wide receivers, I mean, Deandre Hopkins finished 46th amongst wide receivers, right? In PPR, right? So when you look at him, you're looking at a guy who played 10 games. You're looking at a guy when on the field was, big target share. There's a ton of targets there in Arizona, right? So that's one of the reasons I stayed away. It was not so much I predicted the injury, but it was the fact that there was a ton of targets. So I'm like, I'm not spending a 1st-round pick. Sure enough, he busted. But look for him to bounce back. He's always been a top-tier receiver. It depends on where his ADP is. In the 4th round, I'm stealing him. In the 2nd round, you know what? Probably not, which I think he might be weighed heavily based still on his talent and his name. We're going to have to see where his ADP is, but I'm looking for a huge bounce back out of DeAndre Hopkins this year, coming off a terrible year, was on IR and all that fun stuff, 10 games, okay? So Hopkins bounce back. Am I drafting him? Probably not, depending on ADP, okay? Big bounce back. And the last guy here, back injury, ankle, knee, all this stuff, Darren Waller. This was a guy who was a top 3 tight end in fantasy points the year before. It actually finished number 2 in 2020 with 278 278 fantasy points, 145 targets, 9 touchdowns. 145 targets. That's insane for a tight end. 1,196 yards in 2020. Great year. Then he had a down year this year, obviously getting hurt. We saw Hunter Renfrow step up as the primary receiver. So when you look at Darren Waller, I'm seeing great value. I'm seeing a guy that could, bring himself back to top 5 tight end category. Because you guys check back my top 5 tight ends episodes, go back one episode, make sure you subscribe and go check that out. I talk about tight ends. Like there isn't that many good tight ends, right? You've got your Kelsey, Kittle, who's been relatively inconsistent. Maybe Pitts comes and has a good year next year. There's only a handful of tight ends that are really good, really productive, really good receivers, really good yard getters, and have that connection with their quarterback. There's a handful of those. Darren Waller is one of those guys that I'm hoping, based on ADP, a lot of people will sleep on. So if a lot of people sleep on Darren Waller, he could be a huge value and a huge bounce back candidate. So we can't call them sleepers yet because we don't know where they're going to fall. As I said, Derrick Henry, I still think will be a top 3 pick. You got to understand that based on their injuries, based on the lack of performance and recency bias, a lot of people may sleep on these guys. And I know based on talent and opportunity and the the fact that they could stay healthy, let's say, there's going to be a huge bounce back season out of these 5. And there's a ton more bounce backs. I wanted to narrow it down to these 5 that kind of jumped out at me. There's way more. Like I said, subscribe. I'm going to be doing more of these videos, keeping that content rolling. And what blows my mind is I was looking at some other, fantasy football podcasts, Instagram pages, and some people are saying they're on break. Fantasy's done. Fantasy's not done. We go year round. That's how you win. And again, you can jump in the action, pre-order the 16-round drafts, which I've linked it below. I'm telling you guys, it's going to be a monster season. If you guys want to win, this is where it's at. So make sure you guys do click the subscribe. So just to recap, Derrick Henry, CMC, and Saquon, one of those guys. Both those guys could bounce back. But again, bounce back off what? Bounce back off their pinnacle year? Maybe. But definitely going to increase based on last year's performance because they had crappy years. So number 2 coming in. Number 2, CMC and Saquon. Number 3, Russell Wilson, always a top producer. Had a down year. I'm expecting another good year out of him. Number 4, I'm not drafting him. His ADP's high, but Deandre Hopkins. And number 5, Darren Waller, primary target there for his quarterback, Derek Carr, looking for a bounce-back season and a ton of volume yet again for him, okay? Primary target, all right? And if you notice here with Darren Waller, he had 19 targets in week 1. He was making Derek Carr look like a superstar at the beginning of the season. Then it started going downhill. So I still think that connection could still be there depending on what happens the offseason, if they stay together, all that fun stuff. I don't know what's going on. Again, this is very early talk, okay, guys? Subscribe, thumbs up, comment below who's your bounce back player for 2022. Love to get your feedback. I'm pumped. Season's here. We don't take breaks here. Subscribe. Next video coming soon. I'm out.